Welcome, everybody, and thanks for joining us for this Earth Day Cyber Celebration on April 22nd in the year 2020. This gathering is sponsored by the Northern Arizona Climate Change Alliance, and it is co-sponsored by the Arizona Students Association, the Citizens Climate Lobby, the First Congregational Church of Flagstaff, Flagstaff Quaker Friends Meeting, Earth Day Live, and the U.S. Youth Climate Strike. I'm your host, Stefan Sommer. Again, thank you very much for joining in. Part of what we want to celebrate, of course, in Flagstaff is that on November 20th, 2018, the Flagstaff City Council passed the first Climate Action and Adaptation Plan in Arizona. The plan calls for the city municipality to be carbon neutral by 2025, and it calls for the entire city to become carbon neutral by 2040. On January 28th, 2020, the mayor and all the city council members endorsed a declaration of climate emergency. Also in January 2020, the Coconino County Board of Supervisors approved the 477 megawatt Chevelon Butte wind power plant south of Winslow. This will help Northern Arizona achieve its carbon neutrality goals. It will be one of many renewable energy installations that will help to replace the coal-fired power plants that are being retired. The Navajo Generating Station has already been decommissioned. The Cholla Power Plant is closing one of its 3 generators this year. And the people who made these things happen are here with us tonight, and that is a great reason to celebrate. Welcome, everybody, to Earth Day Cyber Celebration. This is the 50th anniversary of Earth Day. It has a long, very important tradition, and I'm really glad that you all came out to celebrate with us. So the important thing about this particular Earth Day is that it's dedicated by the Earth Day Network to climate change. And of course, climate change is really the global issue and will be ever increasing global issue of our time. I'm sorry that we're doing this because we can't really gather in the park the way we normally do for Earth Day. So I'm hoping that this gives us a chance to all come together and celebrate as a community. In these days of COVID-19 where we're all isolated, I think we're all struggling with that a little bit. So it's nice to have you all with us. And people often ask me, what's the relationship between something like COVID-19 and climate change? Well, I don't know that there's a direct relationship per se, but COVID-19 came upon us really quickly, unexpectedly. And so now the scientific community is scrambling to find a vaccine that will really help us to solve this. With climate change, it's a different story. We've seen it coming for a long time. We know that it's getting more and more dramatic in terms of how it's affecting frequency and intensity of storms, droughts, floods, everything, fires. So the good thing about climate change is that it's not coming upon us all of a sudden out of the blue. We know that we need to do something. We know what to do. And if we start doing that right away, we can avoid getting into that kind of extreme situation that we've gotten in with COVID-19. So Earth Day's been around for a long time. If you go back, far enough, all of our ancestors were very connected to Mother Earth. They knew in direct means just how much their survival depended on the Earth and the things that the Earth provided. Over time, we've gotten a little bit more disconnected from all of that. And in 1970, Senator Gaylord Nelson founded Earth Day as a way to bring us back to recognition of the importance of the Earth and how we depend on it for everything, really. And then Dennis Hayes organized the first Earth Day in 1970. And it's been an important way that we can get back in touch with our reverence for the Earth. And in keeping with that, I'd like to share a little bit of a personal story. I hope y'all will put up with me with this little story, and I'm going going to read you a poem. But basically, this story is my first memory of thinking about the earth and all that kind of thing. It was back when I was in 5th grade. My dad was a professor at a small college in southern Minnesota, and the students had put together a coffee house in the basement of one of the downtown hotels. And it was, old building. There was a column of cement, kind of crumbly. And one of the students had painted a painting of the earth on it and put this E. E. Cummings poem on there. I don't know if you all know E. E. Cummings, but to me, he's probably one of the most powerful writers of this last century. And so if you all will bear with me, I'd like to share this poem with y'all. It's called "O Sweet Spontaneous Earth," and he wrote this in 1920. So prior to Earth Day, he was trying to, in my interpretation of this, trying to help us reconnect with just how powerful the earth is relative to our human endeavors. And it goes like this. O sweet spontaneous earth, how often have the doting fingers of prurient philosophers pinched and poked thee? Has the naughty thumb of science prodded thy beauty? How often have religions taken thee upon their scraggy knees, squeezing and buffeting thee, that thou mightest conceive gods? But, true to the incomparable couch of death, thy rhythmic lover, thou answerest them only with spring. So I don't know if that grabs y'all the same way it grabs me, but this grabbed me early in my life and started my strong connection to the earth and helping people to understand how important it is for all of us. That's really when my connection to Earth, and it wasn't really Earth Day, but because this was in 1967 when I was in 5th grade, some time ago, before the first Earth Day. But certainly Earth Day has been a very meaningful thing for me in keeping with that starting thought. So I think Earth Day is very, very important, and it gets more and more important for us all the time as human populations and human impact on our life support systems keeps getting more and more intense. So thank you all for coming out to celebrate. I would like to introduce Chairwoman Liz Archuleta. She's the chair of our County Board of Supervisors here in Coconino County. And I'm really glad that you have been able to join us, Liz. And I would like to invite you to say what Earth Day is for you. Why is Earth Day important, do you think, to you and to our community? And why is it important that it's been dedicated this year to climate change?
Well, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate being part of this wonderful celebration, a celebration that should be significant to every single one of us. And, it has Earth Day has a very personal as well as a cultural meaning and connection for me. I am fifth. There are 5 generations of my family that have lived in Flagstaff, Arizona. In fact, my family was one of the first Hispanic pioneer families to come to Flagstaff, and in the early 1900s, 1906. And on my dad's side of the family, they're Hispanics from New Mexico, and their roots traced back to some of the Spaniards that first arrived in New Mexico. And so for me, my family, in New Mexico, they, lived off the land, they worked the land, and we still have land from the early 1900s that remains in my family today. We have a very strong conservation ethic. That land's been passed down from generation to generation. And here in Flagstaff with my mother's family, her roots, they came and worked in the railroad and the sawmills. But one of the things that we always did when we were kids, and was something passed down from generation to generation, is that we would go pinyon picking in the forest, and we would go and gather firewood in the forest. And one thing we were taught was don't take more than you can use, and also leave no trace behind, to respect, Mother Earth, which in Spanish we say La Madre Tierra. And that's something that I've passed on to my son, who's 11, and I hope that he will pass on to future generations. But there's a very strong cultural connection to the land for Latinos in general. The fact that this, immense respect, this concept of, we all come from the earth, and we enjoy the earth, and part of that respect, though, is being strong stewards of the earth. So for me, I have this almost familial connection to the land, and I feel like I'm one of its keepers. And so Earth Day for me has a very powerful meaning, and is something that I just learned from early on. It's just the fabric of who I am.
Very nice. Believe it or not, I can strongly relate to that. So when I was in 6th grade, my dad moved us to Eastern California so he could learn from a pipe medicine man. And so all my teenage years, I grew up going to sweat every Sunday, and we were taught the same things. You give an offering if you're going to take something from nature. You don't take the whole patch. You take just what you need, and you explain why you need it, and you use it carefully.
Yeah. And there's a lot of medicinal uses and teachings from the land and Latino culture as well, and especially in New Mexico. I mean, if you just go in the forest and you go on the land, you can, you find food. I mean, there's natural plants that grow there, and there's stories and there's folklore around the land, and a lot of the Spanish language is a lot of the terms have to do with the land in New Mexico, some of the old Spanish. And so for me, it's our history, and it's our traditions, and it's very personal.
Yeah, and probably many of us have those kinds of backgrounds in one way or another. But yeah, each one, a whole diversity of different kinds of cultural connections, the further you go back for different families. So can I ask you something a little bit more specific? So what is your vision for how Northern Arizona can come to grips with climate change in a way that boosts that Northern Arizona's economy and people's livelihoods?
Well, I think the one that's most outstanding in my mind has to do with the experience I had in my District 2, which was the Schultz fire and subsequent flooding. The Schultz fire was in 2010. Prior to the coronavirus, the largest, disaster and crisis within Coconino County in its history. Burned, of course, thousands of acres. And as a result of that, there was subsequent flooding because burned on the mountain on the San Francisco peaks, and it caused flooding. And 2 children lost their lives, one in a flood and one in an associated accident with the flood. And a lot of people had property damage and experienced a lot of devastation and personal loss, as well as the loss of being connected to the forest and having that vista burned. So for me, when you take a look at that and you talk about, why are our forests overgrown? Our forests are dry. The fact is that we have several trees competing for water and resources and sunlight. Having grown up in Flagstaff, my family's has been here, as I mentioned, for 5 generations. I have seen firsthand how climate change has impacted our community. I mean, our winters are shorter. They're not as intense as I remember when I was a kid. The summers are hotter. The forests are overgrown. We used to be able to drive through the forest in a pickup truck and get through. Now you can't, get through the forest in a vehicle because they're overgrown and there's thickets. And so I think for me, it's first understanding the effects of climate change. And again, we know about the effects, globally. We know about the effects, but it's important to know about the effects of what's happening to us here in our community, here in our back door. And so for me, it's about this, having these kind of dialogues, educating ourselves on what is happening in our own backyard through climate change, and then making sure that we have a plan and the resources to be able to intervene at this particular time. And for the forest, for the issue that I'm talking about, it's certainly forest restoration, and advocating for funding for the Forest Service to do more forest restoration, to do those large landscape level projects where we are trying to address, hundreds of thousands of acres, millions of acres that need to be basically need to have go back to what healthy forests used to be, and make sure that we not only for our safety but for addressing those issues of climate change. I mean, our watersheds depend on healthy forests. We have so much here in Northern Arizona that we depend on. Our recreation and tourist economy depends on healthy forests. We have incredible public lands that we all enjoy, that we consider our backyard, and that livelihood and quality of life that we are used to is dependent on those public lands and forests.
Yeah, there's so many ways in which we are connected to climate change and its impacts. It's really important for us to do everything we can to avoid more and more extreme costs associated with it. So let me ask you too, what is your vision for how Northern Arizona can achieve net zero? I know Flagstaff has already put together a climate action and adaptation plan in which they're calling for net zero by 2040. And I'm wondering what your vision is for how that can be achieved. And some are now pushing, as the scientific community is, for achieving net zero by 2030. So we can really avoid the more extreme disasters that we see coming. So what's your vision for whether we can do that and how we might be able to do it?
Sure. So I think, obviously we all have a responsibility in that, not only, personally taking responsibility for what we can do at a household level, at a family level. We certainly have responsibility as individuals, and I think that that's where each person can start with having that level of responsibility. Something as simple as, we teach children to recycle. I'm always amazed by the amount of packaging that comes when you order something and this has multiple packaging. How can we begin to teach our children about having this ethic of being stewards and reducing the carbon footprint? Something as simple as can we walk to the store once a week as opposed to using our vehicles? Can we carpool? Just these little changes that we can implement on an individual basis. In terms of the county, I do think that we need to look at developing an action plan as well. We have incorporated some elements within our comprehensive plan of Coconino County, but we don't have a specific climate change action plan. Some of the things that we have done that have been very important is that the allowance of wind farms. Those we very much value that, and we specify that within our zoning and our comprehensive plan. So really not only valuing it, but promoting it, promoting the development of wind farms, promoting the development of solar, and implementing that at the county ourselves, whether it be installing solar roofs or installing parking lots with solar. At the county, moving to alternative fuel vehicles, putting that within our fleet, making sure that there's charging stations at our buildings. You know, something as simple as when you build buildings, I mean, making sure that they are LEED certified, I mean, which to the extent that they, you know, is possible. I think we have eco passes for all of our employees to be able to ride the bus, to encourage them to use the bus as opposed to driving to work. So those are, you know, those are the things that government can do, can put into place to really encourage and motivate people to, you know, practice certain things that will help reduce the, you know, carbon footprint and address climate change. But certainly there is a role for counties to develop an action plan, and that is something that that would be my vision, is what can we do within a, you know, 2-year window, 5-year window, and then, you know, 10-year window.
Wonderful. And the Chevron Butte wind power plant was just approved, was it not? And that's in part of
Yes,
Coconino County?
It's partly in Coconino County. Yes, and it was just approved. And the beauty of it is that it didn't even have to come to the Board of Supervisors, because, I mean, we allow those, and those, we encourage them, and it just had to go to the Planning and Zoning Commission, because we've arranged our ordinances to be able to encourage that and promote that. And then, of course, prior to that is the Perrin Ranch wind farm, of course, which was approved years ago. And, you know, we were one of the, you know, first counties in Arizona to have that. And so I feel like Coconino County has been, you know, very progressive in terms of its promotion of renewables.
Yeah, that's really important to point out too. So many members of our community have been involved in these kinds of things too. And the wind turbines out at Perrin Ranch were in part designed and installed by some NAU graduate students, which, you know, is another important community connection. So we need all those kinds of innovators, and we've got a lot of them here in Northern Arizona. So thank you very much, Liz.
Sure.
So I'd like to introduce Jim McCarthy to join us as well. And he is a member of the Flagstaff City Council. And Jim, to you, why is Earth Day important to you and to the community? And why is it important that this 50th anniversary Earth Day is dedicated to climate change?
Well, thank you, Stefan. I remember the first Earth Day. I was a student at the University of Arizona when we had that, and that was an era of a lot of positive change. We passed the National Environmental Policy Act, the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, and 50 years later, we found an even larger problem, or something to work on, and that's called climate change. We didn't really realize that was an issue 50 years ago, but we do now. So I'd like to point out that 1970s, that was an era of bipartisanship. President Nixon, a Republican, he signed the National Environmental Policy Act. He signed the Clean Air Act. He vetoed the Water Act, the Clean Water Act, because he thought it had too much money attached to it. But the Congress overrode him. In the House, it only lacked 23 votes of being unanimous. In the Senate, it only lacked 12 votes of being unanimous. So it was a real period of bipartisanship. And I long for such a day again.
Yeah. It's really important that we all be together in this, because we cannot solve this particular global problem by just individual action. Everybody needs to get involved. So let me ask you more specifically then, Jim, what is your vision for how Flagstaff can come to grips with climate change and do it in a way that boosts Flagstaff's economy and people's livelihoods?
Well, I think the first steps of that vision have already taken place, and that's that the city council and the community realize that climate change is a critical issue. Like the pandemic that we're experiencing right now, if we don't address it, it will overrun us. It will overrun the environment, and it will overrun the economy. The other thing I'd like to point out is that sometimes when we attack large problems, we get secondary benefits. For instance, World War II was right after the Great Depression. And its purpose, of course, was to fight European fascism. But what else did it do? It stimulated the economy. And so for 80 years, we've had a very healthy economy. And who knows what would have happened? The Great Depression could have gone on for decades more if there hadn't been this large government stimulus. So we need national leadership. It needs to be based on science, and it should not be based on polarizing politics. We need to become carbon neutral. And when is that going to happen? It will happen when the people want it. It will not happen before the people want it. So we need, all of us that are watching this video need to go out and educate our friends and talk to people in the grocery store line. And don't focus on those numbers. I'm an engineer, I love numbers. But don't focus on that. Focus on what people can see with their own eyes. The glaciers are melting. In Flagstaff area, we're getting more infrequent and more intense fires. And we're getting what's called storms on steroids. Just this week, down in the south, we had houses being blown into the highway because of storms. We're getting hotter weather and we're getting colder weather. We're getting unusual weather patterns. So those are the signs of climate change. We don't need to look at the numbers like, did the ocean go up 0.5 degree? No, we can see things that are concrete.
Yeah. There are so many different effects, and we could tabulate the numbers, but we can also look at the human impact and the environmental impact that's happening globally. So let's drill down a little deeper then. What is your vision for how Flagstaff can achieve net zero by 2040? Because that's the goal, of course, set out in the Flagstaff Climate Action and Adaptation Plan. But then more recently, the people in the Flagstaff community have been pushing for moving that date to 2030, net zero by 2030. And of course, that's because the scientific community is saying we need to do that, or we will experience more and more of those disasters that will be more and more costly in terms of dollars and human suffering.
So this is a small community, but I think what's really important is that we can show leadership. If we can become carbon neutral in our energy production, we can be a model for the whole country. And it's a very challenging task, actually. But we do have some advantages, like we have a lot of sunshine here. And we've started some things. At City Hall, for instance, we have over the parking lot, we have photovoltaic. It's a hard word to say. Photovoltaic parking. So we're generating electrical energy in our parking areas. So we need to do that in all the suitable spaces around the city. We bought Red Gap Ranch for water production, but now what we're realizing is that we can use it for solar energy production. Mountain Line bus service here, which is in the Flagstaff and the county area, we just got some grants for electric buses. And battery technology is really moving along. One of the problems with generating solar is that it goes off at night or whatever, but we're making big progress on battery storage. So even if we don't meet the 2030 goal, we will show progress toward it, and that in itself is really important. So there's big efforts and there's the little efforts. For instance, we just upgraded the zoning or the building codes so that we require more insulation. For a few $100s, you can put insulation, which will significantly decrease your heating and cooling. And that house will last for 100 years. So the small investment we put in now can last for generations. So I'd also like to point out that we need to be aware of some of the consumption drivers. For instance, the size of homes is increased 2/3 since I was in college. So bigger houses means more resources, more energy to heat and cool. The world population in my short lifetime has tripled. That is not sustainable. We are making some progress in smaller house or smaller family sizes, but we need to be aware of that. We need to use economics as a tool. I support a carbon tax. I think if we have a carbon tax, the market, the engineers, they'll figure out how to reduce carbon emissions. So we need leaders that will lead for climate stabilization, especially at the national level. We need a Congress and a president that take these issues seriously. So there's a lot of work to do, but we started. And the way you get to the end is you start, and then you take steps and more steps. And before you know it, you'll get there.
Absolutely. Well, and as you all mentioned earlier, you need the community support to really do those things. So I know in Flagstaff, you've got a lot of support already, and we'll continue to build more support. So thank you both for your excellent work. And I'm wondering, maybe we could toast everybody who's joined the celebration.
Toast.
So,
Right.
thank y'all for coming out for this celebration. Cheers.
Cheers.
And keep up the good work. Like Chairwoman Liz was telling us, go out and talk to your friends and neighbors, get everybody involved, and let's make this movement grow and grow. So thank you all very much.
Cheers, everybody.
Cheers.
Thank you.
To Mother Earth.
To Mother Earth.
I'm now going to move over to Coral, Mayor Coral Evans, City of Flagstaff, Arizona, and ask her a couple things. First of all, Coral, hello.
Hello. Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Doing good.
Excellent. So first of all, I'd like you to, if you would, share your personal story. Why is Earth Day important to you and to your community? And why is it important that this particular Earth Day is dedicated to climate change?
Well, thank you so much. I am excited to be here today to celebrate Earth Day with all of you. Growing up here in Flagstaff, as a third-generation daughter of Flagstaff, I had the opportunity to grow up outside. My grandpa, I live in a house that my grandfather built in 1942. And in this yard, he had a small, you would call it probably an urban farm, where we farmed for everything, our vegetables. I remember being outside in the yard with him, helping to pick different vegetables, bringing them inside. I was 8, 9, or 10, before I really realized that you could buy produce in a grocery store, because that wasn't the way things were done back then. We would take things out of the garden, take them up the street, trade them for eggs, trade them for butter, bring things back, that type of childhood growing up. You know, Earth Day is important to me. We celebrate birthdays, we celebrate anniversaries, we celebrate days that are important to us. And so for us to take the time to stop and celebrate the earth, Mother Earth, the importance, our connection as individuals, I think is invaluable. I think now more than ever, when you look at what is happening in our world, it is important that we remember where we all came from and the roots that we have and our hidden connections. I think a lot of times some of the problems that we have as a society has to do with the fact that many of us are so busy, with our lives, our day-to-day, trying to survive, that we don't have the opportunity to go out and be a part of nature, to go out and sit still, sit quietly, and just observe how wonderful nature is. The diversity that's in nature, no two flowers are alike, no two trees or two pine cones. I think when we talk about climate change, now more than ever, it's always been one of the most important topics that we could talk about, but now more than ever, we see the impact that's happening on our earth, and we know that we need to do something. Here in Flagstaff, I'm extremely proud of our climate action adaptation plan that we as a council have moved forward, first ever of its kind in Arizona, and other cities and communities are paying attention and taking note and also doing their own. But really, our climate action adaptation plan, I think, is unique in a couple different ways. First of all, it is built about the concept of resiliency, right? And how we as individuals and as society, how we're going to be resilient to the change that's already happened. And then how we're going to mitigate our impact going forward. And it also included individuals, the basis of our plan was who's going to be most impacted by climate change, to make sure that we have people who are not normally part of the conversation there as part of the conversation. People who are not scientists, they are not experts, they're not, doctors, they don't necessarily have degrees, but they are 100% impacted by what is happening, and they are impacted at a higher rate. Not only that, but I had the opportunity to think between our last discussion and this discussion about the individuals who grew up here like me, who remember when it used to snow, who remembered when the Rio de Flag was an actual river that we played in all summer long, who remembered when we had the ability to fish in lakes around town because there was actual lakes, and remember that you could eat the fish that came out of the lake. Where now there's limitations on how much because of mercury and things like that. So I think now more than ever, the reason why this conversation is important is that we as people have a growing consciousness of the fact that there is only one Earth and that we're all sharing it, and it's a finite resource. And so I'm excited to be part of the celebration and the discussion.
Thank you so much for sharing your personal stories there. And thank you so much for leading the city in such a good direction with this climate action and adaptation plan. I think, I know Sedona is already following with they're starting to develop their own climate action and adaptation plan. And there's a NASCA group down in Cottonwood that's working with their city council now, and another one in Prescott. And so we're hoping that both of those cities will soon follow suit. So let me drill down just a little bit, Coral, if I could. What is your vision for how Flagstaff can come to grips with climate change in a way that boosts Flagstaff's economy and people's livelihoods?
So my vision for us moving forward, we have a very robust and a very comprehensive plan. And my vision is that we are all going to be in it together, and that everybody has a part to play. Everybody's voice is important, and everybody understands that they can do something to help us meet the goal that we're looking at, to help us move forward. Again, it's about who needs to have the skills to become more resilient. How can we as a community become resilient? Who needs additional help? And then what is it that we need to do? I think one of the things that's really important is making sure that we all know that we have a part to play in this. It's not just you, it's not just me, it's not just the government, it's not just that business, but it's us working together and understanding those hidden connections and how we can thread that needle and weave that thread so that we all are moving forward in the same manner, and we're all successful at it, right? Because the idea is not to leave somebody behind, but to make sure that we all move forward in a way that we all prosper and that we all meet our goals and that we all make sure that our planet is here for not only the next generation, but 7 generations out.
Very good. Thank you very much, Coral. Let me drill down a little bit deeper then, if I could. What's your vision for how Flagstaff can achieve one of the goals in that climate action and adaptation plan of reaching net zero by 2040, and the more recent call from the Flagstaff public for upping that schedule now to reaching net zero by 2030 as is recommended by the scientific community?
Well, definitely, I think that it starts with the city as an organization and what are we doing to make sure that we are modeling an example that we want to see. So what are we doing with regards to our fleet, our buildings, ourselves as individuals, right? And then I also think it's what we, again, as individuals are doing. We talk about like COVID-19 and the changes that have happened. And I think that there is a lot of, for lack of a better word, a lot of excitement that could happen because everything's so up in the air and everything is so different and we're in the middle of a crisis, what better time to stop and assess what we're doing to see if there's a better way to do things instead of the way we've always done them. For example, right now we are doing this via the computer screen. There's 3 of us in 3 different places. We didn't drive anywhere to have this conversation or this celebration, right? And so, moving forward, are there people who are actually going to work, driving to work, buildings being built for people to work in that perhaps don't need to be? Is there a different way that we can do this concept of work and do it in a way that's much more hospitable to our planet? Right now there's a bunch of cars that are not on the road because people aren't having to be on the road. So when we return back to the new norm, it's going to be a new norm. And what can we do to adjust? And maybe we don't want to go back, right? We keep talking about going back to the norm. Maybe the idea is that we don't want to go back. Since everything is up in the air right now, and we have really a once in our lifetime opportunity to change how we do things in a big way, maybe we're not going to go back to being normal. Whatever we're headed to next is going to be great. We're going to make it. We're going to be resilient. We're going to survive. We're going to prosper. But maybe we decide that, 25% of us don't need to go back and get into a car to go to work because they can work from their homes. Maybe we decide that being able to go out and have a walk for your lunch is like going to be the new thing that we're going to institute. I don't know. But I do think that when I look at what Flagstaff can be and how we're going to achieve our goals, it's not going to be using the same mindset that got us here. It's not going to be in the same vehicle or the same thought. It's going to be looking at what has changed, making sure that everybody is at the table and everybody is part of the conversation, and then redesigning what it is that we're doing. And what better opportunity than now?
I think you're absolutely right. It really is an opportunity because we have all changed and shifted the way we do things. And as we continue to evolve in these changing pathways, let's keep climate change in mind as a way to guide us on which path to emphasize.
I want to add one more thing that I think is important. It's also looking to our history. A lot of times we talk about the new and building the new. And I just want to mention that, what is more sustainable than a house that's already there? Not having to build another house. The reason why I say that is I live in a house that was built in 1942. Definitely things are different, right? In Flagstaff, you didn't used to have air conditioning. Now it seems like houses are being built with air conditioning. There's definitely difference in the water, does it snow, things like that. But I look at our history and what we're doing, and sometimes I think, what if we go back and retrofit or fix those types of things rather than always thinking that we have to build something new and better? The houses back in the 40s were a lot smaller than the houses now. And we talk about the issue that we have with housing and poverty and things like that. I think if we're really going to address climate change in a way that is sustainable and long-term, we're going to have to address things like poverty. We're going to have to address things like housing. And so I just want to make sure that that is part of the conversation as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you for your good leadership, Coral.
Thank you.
If it's all right, I'm going to go to Art then. Welcome, Art. Again, Art Babbott on the County Board of Supervisors for Coconino County, and he's the supervisor for District 1. So welcome, Art. How are you doing this afternoon?
Great. I just got off a little bit of a tour of the flood area and the alluvial fan from the museum fire, which is one of the way climate changes are manifesting in our community that the mayor spoke about. And so kind of an interesting segue between an on-the-ground walk and observational time I just took with the work that's going on and the topic that we're talking about here today, because they are absolutely related.
Absolutely. So Art, let me ask you too to share your personal connection to Earth Day. So why is Earth Day important to you and to your community? And why is it important that this 50th anniversary of Earth Day is dedicated to climate change?
So, it's interesting listening to the mayor's wonderful story of her growing up. I have some similarities to that. I did not grow up in Flagstaff, but I grew up with a family and a dad who I got to have that first experience about planting a garden with, and that magic of contemplating and understanding what cultivation means and what stewardship means without maybe knowing what those words meant. So to me, when I think of Earth Day, and I'm 56, I think I'm 56. Earth Day is in its 50th year. I had the privilege of walking up in kind of early educational experiences when this was just getting kind of started, as that mixture of contemplation, which you talked about, contemplation of what is our responsibility to this biosphere, what is our relationship to it, what is our stewardship obligations to it, that contemplation coupled with action. And my experience of why I think this is important is when you have issues like climate change, the climate crisis that we are in, it can be incredibly overwhelming. It can be so big, just like this pandemic is so big. It is really hard to get your head and hands and heart around what you do. Earth Day is an opportunity for us to go and learn. It is an opportunity for us to go to try and right-size our part and our place in action. And I think when you look at the sector by sector, just as an example, you look at all the different sectors that contribute to the totality of carbon equivalent emissions here. Transportation accounts for about 30%, electrical generation around 20%. We all have a relationship to each one of those sectors. And I just love what the mayor talked about. Leadership is not about leaders and followers. Leadership is about each understanding what our role is and what lane we play in modeling and going to work. Some of us, like the mayor and I, have the privilege of being elected leaders. Let's not confuse that role with what all of our collective responsibility is to play in that. And so, I am an optimistic person. I also, like the mayor, believe that, desperation sometimes is the mother of invention. And the mother of adaptation to new things. And I love that, because it means there's a new day. And so, I'm not under any illusion, I don't think, of the challenges we face as a species and as a society on how we ensure my 11-year-old daughter gets to have the same types of relationships and experiences that I am so privileged to have. It's a very steep hill, but I also fundamentally believe that when we work on action and when we work on the interests of first things first, serving important multiple objectives, and I'll give an example in a second, we make progress. And I know there are some and I know there's a real question, are we gonna make progress fast enough? I think those same questions are getting played out with this pandemic. It's kind of like, do we flatten the curve fast enough to allow our hospitals to take care of us? It's a really appropriate analogy for what our climate situation is. And so I try and live in that realm of let's take care of the things first that serve multiple objectives. With regard to renewable energies in Northern Arizona, distributed renewable energy generation, we have Navajo generating station that has come offline, Cholla coal-fired generating, Coronado coal-firing generating stations are all coming offline. With that challenge of what that does to our community, let's not forget the opportunity side of what all that new renewable capacity that we can plug into a grid that serves long-term climate issues and our economy issues.
Absolutely, Art. And so I'm going to give you an opportunity to talk more specifically about all of those things by asking you the question, what is your vision for how Northern Arizona can come to grips with climate change in a way that boosts Northern Arizona's economy and people's livelihoods?
So you have just, hit the magical realm of how do you serve competing interests. The first rule that I've come to learn is you can't solve really, really tough problems with simple solutions. Tough, challenging, complex problems by nature are tough to get your head around, and they're tough to affect. With that said, we need to look for those areas of opportunity. We have the largest ponderosa pine forest ecosystem in the world that we are at the foot of here. What do? We work on forest restoration issues. We understand that to serve our forest restoration and the resiliency that the mayor spoke about in the face of the climate, the intensity and increasing intensity of climate, we are going to have to engage in that. We can do that in a way that actually serves our economy. Building forest industries that do provide jobs, but also provide the means for a more resilient forested ecosystem is a wonderful example of serving multiple interests at the exact same time. The renewable piece, we have large landscape scale areas of private ranch land, of public lands here that are well positioned with the open transmission and distribution capacity that all these coal-fired plants are coming offline with, to work to bring online long-term sustainable energy sources. There's a 400 plus megawatt wind farm going on in the southeastern part that we just permitted for Coconino County. I want to say renewable energy has its impacts as well. Wind clearly does. But we have got to understand that making progress is better than no progress at all. And that's where we start. It's a large buffet. You eat it one plate at a time.
Yeah. Well, I think you're right that that 477 megawatt wind power plant that's going in at Chevelon Butte that you all just recently approved is going to be a big part of the answer for Flagstaff's goal of reaching net zero.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for that as well. So let me drill down to the next question, which is really about reaching net zero. What is your vision for how Northern Arizona can achieve net zero by 2040? The Flagstaff Climate Action and Adaptation Plan calls for 2040. Recently, citizens have been trying to make the point that we really need to reach it sooner, by 2030. So what's your vision for how we could reach net zero by 2040 and how we might do it even by 2030?
Okay, so the vision relates to the strategy on how we deal by our sector emissions. We need to prioritize where we have those biggest impacts and prioritize those strategies and action areas that can affect those multiple objectives. So if you look at the energy generation and the transportation sectors, that in and of itself is well over 50% up here of what our regional climate emission-based production is. Let's look at that transition to a post-internal combustion engine transportation system. We do that already. The city of Flagstaff is putting in charging stations. Coconino County is, but this is one where it just makes, even if climate change was not an issue, this is the right thing to do because it builds a resilient economy that is an efficient economy. So let's start with those things that just make the right sense to do regardless. And there's a long list of them. So let's engender that. The mayor's comments about housing and adaptive reuse versus tear down and rebuild is a great example. There's a long list we can be doing. We are fortunate to have community members, citizens, and leaders like Mayor Evans who wear this on their sleeve and walk with it. And there's just a lot of work we can do together if we do it with that shared sense of ownership and leadership.
Well, thank you both for that leadership. I'm going to go ahead and invite the other council members and county supervisors to join us. But before we do that, I'd like for us all to raise a toast to everybody who's joined us this evening for this event. So thank you all very much for coming out, and thanks for support. We need, as our leaders have been saying, we need them to lead the way, but we also need to give them the political support by showing up to events, by writing letters, and supporting them when they make the right decision. Thank you all very much.
Thanks for all you do.
Thank you.
So I'd like to welcome Jamie Whelan, who is Jamie Whelan, who is part of the Flagstaff City Council, and Matt Ryan, who is part of the Board of County Supervisors for Coconino County, and in fact, he is like a supervisor for District 3. But I'd like to start out with Jamie and ask you to tell the community why Earth Day is important to you and the community from your perspective, and why it's important that this particular Earth Day is focused on climate change.
Well, number one, I just want to say thank you, Stefan, for getting us all together in this way. You know, it really provides an opportunity for us to once again pause. You know, this day is so important to all living beings. In 2020, Earth Day is recognized, I believe, as a day of action. It's another signal to change human behavior and to provoke policy and policymakers. You know, as an elected official, I believe that governance is really about the people and the environment that we live in. I believe that the environment is all encompassing, and then our community comes next, and then the elected officials come next. And then we set policy, hopefully listening to all those levels. And I think on this day, it's a day for pause, as I said before. You know, the part the local government has to play is to listen to my constituents and to the earth. We're finding that in this time of emergency, we all get opportunity to pause. And how beautiful is that? And doesn't that make sense on this day? So the pausing, not only do we react as beings to that pause, but even our earth is reacting to our pause. It's healing. It's showing that this is what it would do if we would leave it alone or act a little more respectfully to it. So I have a lot of thoughts on that, and I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you and with Matt on this day, on this Earth Day 2020.
And with Coral and with Art and with
And
Jim.
with Coral and Art and hopefully Lena and everyone.
Yes.
Yeah.
So thank you very much, Jamie.
Mm-hmm.
So let me ask you, because we want to also talk about, you know, some of the nitty gritty, the details of how can we move into the future in a good way. So what is your vision for how Flagstaff can come to grips with climate change in a way that boosts Flagstaff's economy and people's livelihoods?
Well, you know, I'm not so sure that it's my vision. And especially in the seat of an elected official, I have a vision, sure, but I'm just one part of the whole. And the whole is our community. And the community constantly, especially on the city council level, is constantly providing you with feedback and a push and a tug and all that's happening. And I really do envision this community to continue thriving. But I believe that some of our planning, our ways of planning need to change. And it's not necessarily about what we thought we needed in the past. but what we need right now, and most of all, what the people and the generations in the future will need. So I look to this time as an exciting time, and perhaps grabbing that pause and really taking time with it. I see our communities that really need to be entire communities. And by that, I mean housing and grocery and walkable and schools, all within that community, rather than going from one side to the other. I see already we have decided that any street that we do build be a whole street or a complete street, focusing in on sidewalks and pedestrian. I see loops being formed with our foot trails. And I see this cultivation of really working hard on bringing high impact, small, clean footprint businesses into our community. I see cybersecurity, I see biosciences, but I see them as a planned community. I see health communities, and each one has its own sustainability in it. And we're not forced to drive back and forth. I see a strong transit system. I happen to be on the chair of the board of Mountain Line, and it's very exciting to see the opportunities that are before us with funding and with possibilities of making our system stronger and really providing a service that is rapid transit. So people can just walk outside and pick that up. So I see many things for our community, and it's in a time, you know, I think it challenges those of us who plan for our community, that we need to step outside of what we've done and really listen to future generations and what they'll be needing.
Well, thank you, Jamie. Let me ask you something more specific, even still. So what is your vision? And I know that the Flagstaff Climate Action and Adaptation Plan is already in place, and it's made some very clear specifications for reaching carbon footprint goals and a variety of other things. So one part of that is that we're supposed to reach net zero by 2040. So what is your vision for how Flagstaff can achieve net zero by 2040? And do you think that that goal could be reached earlier? Do you think there are ways in which we might be able to reach it by, say, 2030?
I think we need to. You know, and I think that's what all the signs are coming to already. Yes, we do have the cap in place, and yes, you know, that enables us to work in a direction and say, yes, we have a baseline, we have goals, but in this like very short period of time of our world, we already have to adjust, because the data is coming back that, you know, our first idea of where we needed to be carbon free at was much too into the future. We need to pull it back. So we're seeing even utilities say, you know, I'm going to do this by 2050. And I must say it needs to happen sooner. But here's the twist. You know, our sustainability department and work on a tiny budget. And so now we're in this time where every budget is going to be challenged. And so how do we set this as a priority when other things are grabbing our attention? And that's truly going to be a challenge, because this could be slowed down and forgotten. But I don't think our community would allow for that, quite frankly. And that's what I love about this community. They are in constant communication with Don't Forget. This community is filled with scientists and researchers and educators, and those of us elected, and Matt, I'm sure you can vouch for this, we're constantly being given information and feedback to help us with our decision making. So do I think everything needs to happen sooner? Of course I do. Of course I do. I just hope I will have the ability and the budget to do that.
Thank you, Jamie. I think we are all in agreement about the need to do that and to ramp up quickly. And we're glad that the Flagstaff Climate Action and Adaptation Plan is in place so that we can start to set some very specific goals and deadlines. So I'd like to welcome Matt Ryan, who is the County Supervisor for District 3. We'd like to give you the opportunity to do the same thing and tell the community what your view is. Why is Earth Day important to you personally and to the community? And why is it important that it's focused on climate change?
Well, thank you, Stefan. I really appreciate the opportunity. And to answer these questions quickly, oh my gosh, I could talk about them quite a bit. As far as sharing the poem from your youth, I really appreciate that. From my own perspective, Earth Day, from growing up, I'm one of 10, growing up with a bunch of brothers that used to drag me through the woods, and we go pole vaulting across a creek, depends on where you're from. But basically, we would get out into nature, and I have found my solace in nature, and I think that's a big part of this region. The county, Flagstaff, people live here. The nature's a part of their own being. And so Earth Day is really special. I remember I always rode a bicycle before the 10-speed came about, and bicycles weren't popular, and I would go from town to town. But I remember the gas crisis and all the vehicles lining up at the gas pumps, and riding past it quite proudly on my bicycle back then. And so there's a personal note. But Earth Day is special. It's an opportunity to celebrate and pause. But beyond that, it's time to look at what our challenges are and what we need to do, and how we can work together to really coexist, humans on Earth with nature.
Thank you very much, Matt. Yeah, it's important for us all to reflect and find our reverence for the Earth, and then use that to move us to do the right thing.
And then you were asking, I noticed you were asking the question associated with this is the 50th anniversary, and why is climate change so special? With our biodiversity losses increasing at rapid rates, and Earth's temperatures rising, how apropos to pause at this moment to really take a concentrated look and see what we can do from an action perspective to launch into our pieces locally that we need to affect, that hopefully everybody does globally, and we can really affect what's going on there.
Yes, thank you, Matt. And with that, let me ask you the more specific question then. Tell the community, tell our fellow celebrants, what is your vision for how Northern Arizona can come to grips with climate change in a way that boosts Northern Arizona's economy and people's livelihoods?
Well, gosh, I don't know if I can do that in a minute or two, but actually, look at our times right now. We have COVID-19, and we're talking about natural systems. Here, reproductive rates of microorganisms are extraordinary, and their mutation rates are as well. They far exceed how humans adapt and modify. And so similarly, where are we? What do we do? How do we create a vision to adapt and change and modify, as we are doing right now with this threat that we have out here? There are many pieces, anywhere from housing to transportation to looking at our adjacent ecosystems, which actually are filters for the rest of our communities, our region, filters for water, filters for air. So we need to look at the broader landscape and see what we need to do. On a community level, to help the community come to grips, we struggle. We struggle with different issues on what we need to do. I remember in the 2002 regional plan, we put in minimum densities rather than maximum densities. Building in open spaces, building in view sheds, all the components. But when those higher densities come in, it's a real struggle with the community to take a look at it. And yet, if you look at transportation, it's really important to have higher densities so that you can build a successful transportation system with mass transit, that you can increase frequencies, you can make the communities walkable. With the increased density, you can support smaller businesses in the communities. You also have the opportunity to bring in different modes of transportation. We need all modes, not any exclusive, but we need all modes that function together, that are seamless, and provide the opportunity to adapt and modify. Having open spaces in the communities that are linked to other open spaces that might link up to the regional park, or hey, I'm tired at the end of the day, I can hop off and go for a walk with the dog and the family, or it's the weekend, I want to ride my bicycle out to the woods, and I'm going to use these open spaces and linkages that move through these denser components, but it's built into the community. We could really create a denser landscape that's more efficient with our resources, and yet has the amenities that are so important to us. And so, and that's just the beginning. I could go on, but yeah, which piece do you want to talk about? Do you want to talk about forest? And
There are many details. But so let me give you the opportunity by asking you something more focused and more specific. What is your vision, Matt, for how Northern Arizona can achieve net zero by 2040? And that comes out of the Flagstaff Climate Action and Adaptation Plan, but I'm hoping, of course, that that would expand beyond just Flagstaff. I know that Sedona is now working on its own climate action and adaptation plan. So what's your vision for how Northern Arizona can achieve net zero by 2040? And what do you think? Do you think it's possible for us to really do what we need to, which is reach net zero by 2030?
Well, the first piece is I'm an incrementalist, and I guess I use the analogy of putting a frog in a water that's hot. It'll jump out, and yet if you put a frog in water and raise the temperature slowly, the frog will stay in the water, and that's not so good for the frog. I don't know if it's the best analogy, but the other side of it is the frog doesn't recognize the change that's occurring. As an incrementalist, in order to adapt, people want us to make immediate change and very dramatic change when an issue comes up. But as noted by Jamie and others, we work with community, and social tolerance is a very important aspect. If you incrementally start to build in the right components to moving towards zero carbon, by 2040 or 2030, if we could do that, you need to do it in a way that is acceptable to change with people and how you modify it. So at a landscape scale, I think we're beginning. The Planning and Zoning Commission used our comprehensive plan that was put together by our people that looked at alternative energy as an objective. Well, if you look at Arizona, we have these wonderful, beautiful, clean air, open skies, lots of sunshine, and wind. And if we work with the Corporation Commission and get them to remodify or change their portfolio for renewable energies, that's an element that we need to build in more solar opportunities as well as wind. You could have solar arrays associated with communities or neighborhoods. So that's an element that we can go ahead and build in. You build it into the transportation system. Automation's a big part. We're getting to a point where we're using more electric or battery based, and they're trade-offs in anything that you do, but the automation could be a way of us incorporating rapid transit in some of our corridors. You could have a car come on that picks up one neighborhood as the train of other cars, bus in a way, link up with each other and move in and help out that way. Or it's coming from a particular parking area or a particular trailhead, depending upon the behavior of the community. Reach out further, we have the opportunity to have parking areas. I know we already have one out in parks where people can park. And what if we started with a single item like NAPTA is doing, or Mountain Line, that you offer a van that employees can pull in. Well, you get your first van going, and then you put on the next piece incrementally. You build the system of now we can have different times, just not that one time everybody drives. And you have a few other vans, and then maybe we can modify it that we have the ability to use services and have services mechanisms built in. So there's a way to really start to look at each aspect of our community and what we need to do. And then how do we reduce that carbon footprint? Let's look at the appropriate vehicles and how they work. And so I think we can do it, but you need to build in social tolerance and incrementally move in strategic ways that can help us do this.
Well, thank you very much, Matt. And, maybe part of that is a major education campaign to help people understand why the IPCC has put these goals in place and why it's so critical. At the beginning, I said something about how COVID has really come upon us really quickly. And now the entire scientific community is scrambling to get us a vaccine. And that's really going to be the solution for all of this. We've seen climate change coming for a long time, and we want to avoid getting into that kind of emergency mode with it. And the only way to do that is to work with everything we got now.
Well,
And I want to talk about 6 other things now. Are you ready?
Yes, I know.
Hydroponics out on Red Gap Ranch,
there we go.
Yeah.
Well, Chevron Butte. So, APS saying that they're going to go to 100% renewable by 2050, that's a huge shift. And with the Chevron Butte 477 megawatt wind power plant coming online, although they're going to start building it very shortly next year.
Right.
That might solve our issues. It might allow us to shift to all electric vehicles, to going to net zero within our various cities in Northern Arizona much more quickly than we've been envisioning in the past.
Right. Right.
Yeah, I think, we're definitely having the opportunity and, to make up for NGS, we're additional pieces for all this transmission in the area. Yeah. I think find the right landscape and right opportunity. We have a great opportunity with that, which is really good too.
We do.
Yeah.
Yes, so the future could be good.
Yes.
We make it so.
We're going to. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you guys again for joining in. I'm going to go ahead and hit stop recording.
Well,
Okay.
hang on a second.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
okay.
Hang on don't go anywhere, Jamie.
Oh, what?
So Stefan, in inviting us here, said, we want to celebrate this occasion. So we
Oh.
wanted to toast.
That's
So the
right.
first thing, we got to toast. Buy local. We want you to do that. And we want to toast to everybody.
That's
Let's
right.
celebrate Earth Day and make a
There we
change.
go. Happy
Thank
Earth
you all for
Day.
joining in on this celebration.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm really glad that y'all are part of this Earth Day celebration. And I'd like to start out with Regina and ask Regina to share her story with the community of why this Earth Day is important to you and to the community, and why it's important that this particular Earth Day is focused on climate change.
Happy Earth Day.
Happy Earth Day.
For me, Earth Day is an everyday movement, and we can take action anywhere we are, especially in this time of shelter at home and staying at home to stay healthy and well. Since my childhood, environmental awareness and protection, for which Earth Day was built upon, has been inculcated in my consciousness. Growing up in a huge household in rural Philippines, my family did not have access to potable running water in the house. In my grandmother's home where I was raised, there was an artesian well nearby where my brother and I walked with our little feet with 2 pails, 2 buckets each for each one, and fetch water every day. I've also seen firsthand in my hometown back in the Philippines how years of unmanaged aggressive growth has caused extreme air, water, and noise pollution, severe traffic congestion, with an alarming impact on public health. The strive for accessible clean water as a child eventually evolved in my awareness and sparked my involvement on water conservation, clean energy, clean air, sustainable waste management, and sustainable development. First, as a student activist all the way from high school to college, and then as a nonprofit volunteer, and then later on as a policy advocate working for public agencies in the Philippines, and then in Arizona, in Northern Arizona, when we moved to the US in 2006. So Earth Day is an annual event celebrated around the world. First celebrated in 1970, long before I was born. Earth Day gave a voice to an emerging public consciousness about the state of our planet to demonstrate support for environmental protection. It now includes coordinated globally by the Earth Day Network in more than 193 countries, especially the Philippines, where I started celebrating Earth Day in grammar school. So Earth Day is an everyday movement, and we can take action anywhere we are. Now on its 50th anniversary, the theme for Earth Day 2020 is climate action, the gargantuan challenge, but also the vast opportunities of action on climate change. Let's work together to strengthen and galvanize an Earth Day movement that goes to the very heart of what Earth Day is all about, empowering individuals and communities with information, tools, and resources needed to make a meaningful impact and drive change. Thank you.
Thank you, Regina. And so let me ask you some more focused, specific questions about this. I think everybody in the community probably agrees that we need to move on climate. But more specifically, what is your vision, Regina, for how Flagstaff can come to grips with climate change in a way that boosts Flagstaff's economy and people's livelihoods?
First and foremost, inaction is not an option. The climate is changing, and we humans are contributing to these changes. Climate change requires local, state, federal, and international policy actions. There is much common ground on which all sides of this discussion could come together to address climate change with policies that are practical, flexible, and durable. I believe in a policy approach that acknowledges the cost of action and inaction, and the competitiveness of Flagstaff regional economy and our businesses, especially small businesses. We can call on policymakers to seize an opportunity that rises to the challenge of climate change, leveraging business leadership and expertise, and our energy edge in Northern Arizona, and our ability to innovate. Community engagement and private-public partnerships are integral in the process of implementing the Flagstaff Climate Action and Adaptation Plan. We can increase and strengthen the engagement of Flagstaff's key economic sectors: advanced manufacturing, astronomy, bioscience, craft brewing, digital e-commerce, entrepreneurship, retail, and tourism. We can leverage the power of business and enterprise to develop, finance, build, and operate the solutions needed to power regional economic growth, mitigate greenhouse gas emissions, and build resilient, lower carbon infrastructure. There are already some local businesses taking action in their own operations and along their value chain by investing in technology solutions and enhancing their energy efficiency. We can encourage and incentivize business and enterprise to embrace advanced technologies and innovation that offer the best solution for managing climate risk and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So inaction is not an option.
Thank you, Regina. And now to drill down more specifically, so the Flagstaff Climate Action and Adaptation Plan calls for net zero carbon emissions in the city of Flagstaff by 2040. And some have more recently called for reaching that goal sooner, by 2030. So what's your vision for how we will reach net zero in Flagstaff by 2040? And what's your vision for whether we can do that by 2030?
The greater Flagstaff region can achieve net zero by 2040 or even sooner. I stand with every global citizen seeking a cleaner, stronger environment for today and tomorrow. Combating climate change requires citizens, governments, public agencies, and businesses to work together. Local businesses play a vital role in creating innovative solutions to protect our planet. A challenge of this magnitude requires collaboration, not confrontation, to advance the best ideas and policies. Together, we can forge solutions that improve our environment and grow our Flagstaff regional economy, leaving the world better for generations to come. First, by strengthening scientific enterprise to find solutions that offer the best opportunity to deliver cost-effective, achievable, and meaningful greenhouse gas emissions reduction. Second, by improving energy efficiency on both the supply and demand sides that can bring almost immediate benefits to business operations and the environment. Third, by promoting climate resilient infrastructure. Adaptation and resilience are critical to minimizing the risks and impacts of climate change. There are local businesses ready to design and build the resilient, low carbon infrastructure of the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Regina. Thank you very much. Adam, same thing for you. Why is Earth Day important to you and your community? And why is it important that it's focused on climate change?
Thanks again for having us and for putting this together, and happy Earth Day to you and everybody else watching. For me personally, I grew up very connected to the earth and to the seasons and to our part and our place on the earth. and part of nature, part of, the animals, the water, the wind, just everything. We're all connected in this bigger picture of what nature really is and what this all is. And so Earth Day has always been something I've kind of lived by on a daily basis. I love that we celebrate it one day a year, but really Earth Day is every day. Water is life. And all these different efforts and movements and consciousness across the globe, I'm so grateful to see rising up today into the consciousness of humanity and into, public conversations and just public culture, mainstream culture. And so Earth Day to me is really important because we are part of the earth and we need the earth and the earth needs us. Well, maybe more that we need them than they need us, but we need to start really changing the way we engage and interact with the earth. And this pandemic's really helping open up our eyes to a lot of things that could be. And I'm really hoping we learn from these lessons. And when we do go back to our normal lives, we maybe have an opportunity here to pivot and really bring a new approach to tomorrow and what lies ahead. So I'm very grateful that they've made climate action the theme of the 50th anniversary. And I'm excited to be talking to you all about this.
Thank you very much, Adam. I think we're all on board with those sentiments.
Right.
Let me drill down a little bit with you, Adam. What is your vision for how Flagstaff can come to grips with climate change in ways that boost Flagstaff's economy and people's livelihoods?
Well, a lot of things that we can be doing to address climate change locally as a municipality does create jobs, does create money flow in our system. We look at like our bio waste, we look at our, landfill, we look at the way we move people, we look at our buildings, and taking on each of these angles of how we impact the earth negatively, there's a lot of room for growth from where we are today in the way we operate. So it's going to take a real pivot, and it's going to take a lot of political will with a lot of leadership at the city to really help us get back on the right track and make some big, lasting, impactful changes. We're looking at 50 megawatts solar operation farm at Red Gap Ranch. Really looking at making some fundamental shifts in the way we live. And so I think that by the city could really help play a role, and then engaging all of you, the community, to do your part and help us by doing your part. Leave the car at home, live a life that's more sustainable, be conscious about where your food's coming from, be aware of how your money is going from A to B and where it's traveling to and from and what it is and what it is not supporting, and so much more. But I look forward to that, and I think we're ready for it.
Thank you, Adam. Okay, and let's drill down a little bit further. What is your vision for how Flagstaff can achieve net zero by 2040? One of the goals that's stated in the Flagstaff Climate Action and Adaptation Plan. And more recently, people have been pointing out, as IPCC suggests, we need to do that sooner than then if we want to really avoid climate disaster. So what's your vision for how we could reach it by 2040? And do you think that we could perhaps reach it by 2030?
So the Climate Action and Adaptation Plan is a great document with a lot of wonderful steps and plans in place to help us really move forward as a municipality and as a community. But as you mentioned, bringing that number from 2040 to 2030 is something we can do, and we are hoping to do. With the climate emergency declaration that we're looking to pass in the near future, it says exactly that we go to net zero by 2030. And that's extremely ambitious, but that's the lens we need to be looking at this through. And it's going to take a big shift in the way we spend our money and the way we move forward as a society. But if there's a time to do it, that time is now. So I'm optimistic, but it's going to take a lot of people getting on board together to make this happen and get this momentum moving. And I really believe we can do it. And I think now's the time.
I couldn't agree more. And, Earth Day is a way that we're all coming together to remind ourselves that we need to do this. And so hopefully we will take this celebration forward and all come together to achieve those goals.
And rethink the way we live and the way society operates. I think that's my biggest takeaway point is, we've been living a certain way for a long time, and this is really an opportunity to think outside the box. So thank you.
Thank you all very much. And let's toast the community for coming out for Earth Day celebration. Thank you all. Good to see you.
Cheers.
Cheers, everybody. All right. So I'd like to welcome Charlie to the party here, to the celebration. Charlie Odegaard is another member of the Flagstaff City Council. And so thank you very much for coming out and joining everybody, Charlie.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Oh, yeah, thanks for joining us. It's great to see you guys. Let me just start by asking you, what do you think? Why is Earth Day an important thing for you, and why is it an important thing for the community? And why is it important that this particular Earth Day is dedicated to focusing on climate change?
Yeah, especially with this being the 50th anniversary coming up here next week, really exciting. We as a community for the city of Flagstaff do a celebration every year, as most of your listeners and viewers know. We've been doing it at Bushmaster Park for the last couple of years and downtown before that. And it's such a great community event of lifting up where we want to be as a community concerning climate change. Climate change is real. We're in the middle of it. And it's up to us as a community to go in a direction that really makes a difference. We had the climate emergency declaration discussions about a month or so ago at the city council, and we gave direction. We would like to do a declaration and also put a little meat behind that in trying to be carbon neutral for the organization by 2030. Even though the request was to get by 2040, I think, we should be a little more aggressive and be 2030 carbon neutral as far as an organization for the city of Flagstaff. And as you know, we've done CAP, the Climate Action Adaptation Plan, that got passed in 2018 with some specific things for it to happen. And we as an organization are very fortunate to have Nicole and Jenny, very talented ladies to help us, guide us to implement the CAP. And right now we're kind of doing the low-hanging fruit that's doable for the organization and the community. And then as we go along in years, especially to get by 2030 to be carbon neutral, we're going to have to really up our game and to get there as far as an organization and a community.
Yes. What is the low-hanging fruit, if I might ask?
Especially, the simple things, when we do fleet purchases, we're already doing, when we purchase a new fleet, because, they have a rotation. With aging of vehicles, we're purchasing electric hybrid vehicles for the community. And I believe we were the first in the state where our police officers are actually driving electric hybrid vehicles as their vehicles. And so that's kind of exciting that, we're first in the state to kind of push the envelope because we're taking the issue concerning climate change very seriously.
Very good. Excellent. Well, and let me drill a little deeper now. So those are some of the things that we're already doing. We've got the plan in place. But tell us, share with everybody, what's your vision for how Flagstaff can come to grips with climate change in a way that boosts Flagstaff's economy and improves people's livelihoods?
Right. And part of the, that livelihood, I think, is being a healthy community. So we're past some things that helped with that health of the community. One of the things that we passed was an ordinance concerning T21, where, people can't smoke or do vaping products under the age of 21. I think we were the second community in Arizona. I wish we were the first, but takes a little while for the wheels of governance to work through a process. But then as far as, visioning where we want to get there, it's been very important for me to be as a multimodal community. Multimodal concerning walking, biking, transit, everything thing that I can do in my policy decisions that I make is to help create that multimodal infrastructure in our community, because we as an organization for the city of Flagstaff, well, we have to create that infrastructure, whether it's our land use or concerning open space or even the energy code. For example, we did the energy code, and the energy code was to make our homes more efficient. And of course, with efficiency helps with creating jobs, because now there's certain things that we want to see in a home, whether it's having that electric vehicle outlet there in the garage, or to create a home that is draft free. There's a vacuum process. They do a test on the home to see how sealant a home is. So these things that we do help create the sustainability of a home, and also does create some jobs with that sustainability, because our expectations are higher. We as a community are very ambitious in our expectations of what our community wants to look like. And so whether it's the energy code or the open space, things like that, because we cherish our open space, we cherish our view sheds, but then there's also, well, to make sustainability happen and make a difference for climate change, you have to create some compactness within the community. And it's really tough to find that balance within a community of what people want. When you consider compactness, sometimes, well, then you got to have some height or some infill. Well, then people say, well, there's some of the view sheds that are maybe disappearing. So you always have to find that balance. And I really try to make a difference in trying to find that balance, protecting those view sheds or that open space, and also have an infill projects that make sense for the community. And that does create some tension, like Schultz Pass, for example. I was in favor of keeping that parcel as an open space parcel, because to me, it didn't meet the threshold of compactness and use for residents to be spread out or sprawl in a community, when really we should be looking at more of an infill type things.
Well, I know some of those decisions are tough.
They are not easy, because everyone has an opinion. And if you don't agree with each other's opinions, sometimes you kind of look like the bad guy when it's not necessarily the case.
Well, let's drill just a little bit deeper. As you mentioned before, about how in the Flagstaff Climate Action and Adaptation Plan, the goal is for the city to be carbon neutral, net zero by 2040. And recently there's been a push from the scientific community and from the local Flagstaff community to push that forward to 2030. So what's your vision for how we might be able to reach that net zero by 2040? And do you think we could reach it by 2030?
Yeah, well, we're going to need help, and we're going to need help from our utility companies. I know APS came out not too long ago to want to be carbon neutral, I believe, by the year 2050, which is, a big step for a utility company, knowing that, that's the direction that we need to go as a community. And so we're going to need help from the utility companies for us to reach the goal we want as a community, because things are pricey, especially with solar implementation, wind, and some of those things. Does that make sense? Does wind make sense in some areas, and solar better makes sense in other areas? Fortunately, we're in the Southwest, so we have sunshine on our favor, but we have only 300 days of sunshine versus 360 some days, like down in the valley, or but how we're going to do that is concerning land use planning, concerning the codes that we're going to adopt, is what portion do we want to have it where it's carbon neutral? Are we going to have at some point, and we're going to have to make some hard decisions, because these all come with costs involved too. To see maybe a solar rooftop on every new house that going forward, and what can we do to bring solar on existing houses here in Flagstaff? And so, that's going to require some tough decisions and some dollars, maybe some allocation dollars, maybe some 50-50 cost shares. We as a community have made it priority for water conservation. And so with that water conservation, we've brought dollars to the tables to help people to pay for taking out their lawns, that they have a nice, beautiful green grass lawn, and do a zero-scape, for example, with that lawn. And we as a city provide dollars to help the homeowner with that. And so we're going to probably have to make those decisions to bring help as far as, especially on the solar side of things. And I think it's doable. I think the community wants it. And I think we just need to do it. And I've always said to do something always takes political will. And if you have political will, things will happen. And I know with this council body, especially with Council Member Aslan, the health and the environment are very important. And it seems like we all have our own, little things that find important for us. I find infrastructure very fascinating and very important for the community to bring projects that, especially things that make flow of traffic a little easier, so we don't get stuck in our cars and get bogged down and with the car running because we're stuck in traffic. And especially, we've had the complaint of Milton Road being a congested traffic, and it's been like that for years. Well, we can do something different, and we are working on things different. And the voters passed back in 2018 some infrastructure projects to alleviate traffic on Milton, and because we want to improve that flow for our community. And also to help things, we're always looking for foots. Vice Mayor Shimoni's always talking about bike paths to get people out of the cars. So we're all seem like kind of working in a direction to kind of help our community and in some ways address climate change, because we're making a less impact. And plus we're going to have to make some decisions of how we're going to ramp up, because we have a goal, especially for the organization, be carbon neutral by 2030.
Well, thank you very much, Charlie. So challenges for sure, but also opportunities. Yeah.
Definitely, no question.
So let me welcome Council Member Austin Aslan, who's also a member of the Flagstaff City Council. Thanks for joining us, Austin.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Stefan, for having me on, for the invitation.
Oh, well, I'm really glad to have you, and hope you all had a wonderful day outside enjoying nature somewhere. And based on that, let me ask you too, what do you think Earth Day means to you, and why is it important to you and to your community, and why is it important that this 50th anniversary Earth Day is focused on climate change?
Great. Well, Stefan, I really enjoy Earth Day. I love Earth Day. I think it's very important, and actually I think more and more it's essential. I have some early memories. They're kind of foggy. Way back in my childhood of watching Earth Day celebrations on TV and watching co-host Carl Sagan sort of talking about the environment and greenhouse gases and stuff like that. And of course, I was completely starstruck with someone like Carl Sagan spearheading something like this. And while those memories are foggy, they certainly were inspirational and have stuck with me for a long time. Earth Day is as important as any other holiday for an event or an occurrence or a place or a person that we celebrate. This is our home, right? The planet Earth is all we've got. And while that may sound cliche, it's absolutely true. And, Earth Day is really important because it creates community, it bolsters awareness, and it provides a sense of collective call to action. And, actually every day should be Earth Day. But we're creatures of habit and routine, and getting out of our personal patterns once a year to specifically drill down and focus in on these issues of climate change and biodiversity awareness and environmental health and greenhouse gases and deforestation and all of these issues is definitely something that we can set aside one day a year at least to really focus in on and rally around, right? So, you know, it provides us all with that needed energy. And I'm really excited to see it coming into focus this year as around climate change. Because climate change it was 40 years ago at least when I remember Carl Sagan hosting events on TV. So this is nothing, we're not surprised by any of this, but we are in the throes of it. And, you know, I recall a recent tweet from President Barack Obama, who just a week ago or so said, "We've seen all too terribly the consequences of those who denied warnings of a pandemic. We can't afford any more consequences of climate denial. All of us, especially young people, have to demand better of our government at every level." And he goes on to talk about voting, but the larger point is still very relevant. We have the capacity to head a major crisis and disaster off at the past, and we need to use our collective intelligence and willpower and political will, as Councilmember Odegaard talked about, to get the job done. And you know, as a council member in Flagstaff, I'd like to focus in on what that means for our community. And I think your next question has kind of segues into that, right?
Yes, thank you very much. And I think everybody who's joined in with us this evening feels the same way and can definitely understand all of those things. Let's ask you something a little bit more specific. So what is your vision for how Flagstaff can come to grips with climate change, and in a way that boosts the economy and improves people's livelihoods?
Great question, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak more specifically at a local level here. In order to answer that question, I think it's important to demonstrate an awareness of where we're at with climate change in Flagstaff. So, you know, I see lots of opportunities for economic development, but we also really have to address the threats that are looming and that we can see coming. Geographically, from my perspective, the center of climate change. You know, science indicates that the U.S. Southwest vegetation is becoming more variable and less predictable. And, you know, this is a region that's already subject to intense droughts and intense storms. And we sit in the middle of this amazing treasured ponderosa pine forest. And we know that as climate change progresses, I mean, the science is very clear on this, that we'll face rapidly increasing risks from fires and floods, decreased snowpack, heightened drought, vectors for disease like mosquitoes, you know, and other diseases that can not only affect humans, but our livestock, which affects our economic well-being. And these changes are coming. So the opportunity, I think, though, for us is if we could do some really smart planning and, you know, stick to it, Flagstaff is going to benefit enormously economically from the impacts of climate change that are happening faster in other places, especially in Arizona, like Phoenix and the Verde Valley and Cottonwood and things like that. You know, Flag is the weekend playground and the heat escape for the rest of the state. And, you know we're going to face increasing pressures as people leave Phoenix and arrive on our doorstep to live, to work, and to play. And that comes with an enormous set of opportunities if we can leverage what we know very well and protect those who live here now. And, you know, so how does climate change affect Flagstaff economically? Well, we can become sort of an eco-tourism center. You know, people are going to be coming here more and more to recreate and to escape the heat. And we can, if we have all our ducks in a row, we're going to be able to benefit from all of those visitations.
Thank you, Austin. Yeah, there are a lot of opportunities. I know we'll always be a little bit cooler than the other parts of Arizona, but we hope that we don't get to the heat levels where they're at now, because that certainly could come if we don't curb our emissions. And along those lines, let's drill down a little bit further. What is your vision for how Flagstaff can achieve net zero by 2040? And
Yeah.
you think that we might, what would we need to do to reach that goal by 2030 as the scientific community is pushing for?
Let's shoot for 2030 instead.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of things that we can do. And I think one of the most important things we've already done is the previous council created the CAP, the Climate Action and Adaptation Plan. That was one of Councilmember Odegaard's feathers in his cap for being a part of a unanimous vote to get that passed. Very important document, really lays the groundwork. It focuses the community, it focuses city staff and management on this priority and this mandate that we have passed down to everybody to work closely on this. And it's a living document. You know, it's going to change over time, and it can become more flexible and responsive to the needs on the ground. You know, we've got the pandemic economic, you know, downturn that we're facing right now. And so you never know what life is what kind of curveballs are going to come our way, and we need to be flexible. But, you know, to talk specifically, I do want to speak generally a little bit, because, you know, what I'd like to see happen is that Flagstaff shows a lot of leadership on this. I think we're in a position, and we have the political capital and the political will as a community and as a council to push ahead and be leaders on the changes that need to happen. And, you know, we're not the only folks who are doing that, and that's really exciting. You know, climate change is well recognized and serious enough that lots of industries, corporations, and governments worldwide are planning for carbon neutrality. You know, it's not enough, but it's a great start, and it's nice to be in good company. A recent Forbes list of include big names like Coca-Cola, Monsanto, Toyota, Ford, American Airlines, Disney, McDonald's, and the list goes on and on. APS recently announced that it was shooting for carbon neutrality goals. And one of the things specifically that I think we can do is help them along and be a good partner. I think it's really important for us to go down to Phoenix and to lobby the Corporation Commission from time to time, breathe down their neck a little bit and hold their hand and make some plans together to speed this along. That's one of the biggest ways we can have an impact is our energy usage, right? And, you know, one other great example that's really inspiring to me is how Microsoft has been talking about going all in and announcing that by 2050, they're going to be carbon negative, which means that they're going to take care of their carbon footprint all the way back since their founding in, I believe it was 1975, which is really exciting. So we're not alone out there. We're not sticking our necks out too far, but we do need to, you know, we're the horse that's pulling the cart, and there's a lot of good things we can do. Specifically, one thing that I am trying to sponsor and would like to see move forward robustly is some sort of carbon, we need a carbon offset. Flagstaff needs to come up with a way to offset our carbon output. And the biggest gorilla in the room in that regard is transportation, right? Cars, trucks, industry, but also our growing airport economy, which is really exciting. No one enjoys walking out my front door and just getting in line at the airport for a trip and then coming home and just driving 2 miles to be back at my house. And that convenience is incredible and exciting, but it absolutely comes with a huge carbon footprint. And we need to make we need to atone for that, so to speak. We have to be able to get to carbon neutrality. And I don't want to go so far as to say that what we need is something specific like a carbon tax. I don't want to get stuck in terms and arguments like that, but we need to have a real and meaningful way to offset the carbon that we're using as a city. And that could include more solar arrays and wind power out on Red Gap Ranch, for example, and lots of other interesting ideas that are cropping up. And there are people out there who are much more in tune with the new technologies and emerging innovations than I am. But I ran for city council in order to be a strong proponent and voice for climate change adaptation and mitigation. And it is absolutely my intent to seek out great ideas and really push them forward and make them happen.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Austin. And thank y'all for coming out to celebrate Earth Day and share your visions for the future. We're looking to back you up all the way, and we hope that you can push for the kind of future that we all need.
Cheers.
Thank you guys very much. Cheers.
Stefan, can I say one more thing?
Yeah.
You know, I mentioned to you earlier offline that one of the interesting consequences or side effects of the pandemic that we're dealing with, a silver lining, so to speak, is that the Earth seems to be getting a little bit of a breather, which is nice. You know, we're getting anecdotal evidence of lots of cool things like dolphins showing up in the Venetian canals again, satellite images of smog just totally clearing out of large metropolitan areas like, you know, cities in China and Los Angeles and other places. I've also heard reports about big cities in India for the first time in 50 years, being able to see the Himalayas on the horizon, which is so neat. And I think that it's really awesome that the Earth is getting this moment to stretch and catch its breath. And my hope, and Stefan, you'll know this better than I will as a climate scientist, but my hope is that that's going to push back our timeline on the worst case scenarios for when we're going to reach a breaking point. And this is only an opportunity if we seize it, though, right? It's not enough that we just acknowledge to screw around with before we're getting serious. This is an opportunity to get a little bit ahead of the ball and do what we need to do in order to get our economy reset for more of an ecological mindset. And, you know, what better time to do some spring cleaning and to rethink things and to start over than when the reset button has already been hit. You know, we're all making adjustments and making sacrifices right now because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Maybe this is an opportunity for us to think about a paradigm shift in terms of our economy and climate change as well.
Well, I think it shows us that we can do it. Now, we don't want to have to be in this situation we're in now where we're forced to do it. And so we want to start addressing climate change right away so that we don't get into this kind of a dire strait in the near future.
Yeah, let's seize the moment.
Yeah. So again, thank you all for coming out. Thanks for your good words,
one more cheer.
good thoughts, your good dedication to
Thank you.
to a good future. Cheers.
Thank you for what you're doing, Stefan. And
Cheers.
thanks
Thank you.
to the community that's behind you and all the folks who are watching and supporting this. It's really inspirational, and it's very helpful to know that the community is out there and it has our back as we're making these tough decisions. It makes a big difference. And while it's important for us to show leadership, it's really nice to be pushed from behind.
Thank you. Yeah, we need both. Thank you all.
Thank you,
all very
Stefan.
much.
Cheers, everybody.
Cheers.
Thank you.
To Mother Earth.
To Mother Earth.